Okay, so here we have verse 28:10. And Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. Coming upon a certain place, he passed the night there. For the sun was setting. Taking one of the stones of the place, he made it his headrest and lay down in that place. He dreamed, and lo, a ladder was set on the ground, and its top reaching to heaven. And lo, angels of God going up and coming down on it. And lo, the Eternal stood up above it, and said, I, the Eternal, am the God of your father Abraham and God of Isaac. The land on which you are lying I will give to you and to your descendants. And your descendants shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread out to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. Through you and your descendants will all of the families of the earth shall find blessing. And here I am with you. I will watch over wherever you go, and I will bring back to you this soil. I will not let you go of you as long as I have yet to do what I have promised to you. So we first have this speaking of Hashem to Jacob, and what does this bring for us? So in 28 through 27, really what we're going to see is that Jacob has received 3 blessings, 2 prior blessings than this blessing of hearing from the Lord before this. He received his first blessing from Isaac, as is disguised as Esau in Genesis in Genesis 27 through 29. And by Isaac when Jacob is departing for Haran in Genesis 28, 3 through 4. So now we see him in Genesis 28, 13 through 15 with his dream at what is thought to be Bethel. Well, it's called that anyways. Whereas the first blessing is one of material well-being and dominance. Only the second and third blessings convey the fertility that is the land of Israel. The first and the third blessings explicitly designate Jacob as the conveyor of the message, although arguably the second blessing does as well by giving Jacob the blessing of Abraham in Genesis 12, 2 through 3. Only the third blessing reveals that Hashem's presence will definitely be with Jacob. That is, I think, to say that it is that the blessing did pass from Isaac through. So, verse 16. Waking from his sleep, Jacob said, Truly, the Eternal in this place, and I did not know it. He was awestruck, and he said, How awe-inspiring is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So let's take a little picture. Look. Verse 18. Rising early that morning, Jacob took the stone that he had laid under his head, and he set it up as a monument. He even poured oil on its top. He named that place Bethel. But originally the town's name was Luz, L-U-Z. Jacob then made this vow. If God is with me and watches over me on the path that I am taking and gives me bread to eat and clothes to wear, and if I return safely to my father's house, then will the Eternal be my God. And this stone that I have set upon as a monument shall be a house of God, and of all that you give me, I will declare 1/10 to you. So here comes in 1/10, the idea of tithing, which is an interesting reoccurring theme throughout all of most religions. So what happens next? Chapter 29. Jacob then moved on and headed for the land of the people of Kedem. He looked, and lo, a well in the field, with 3 flocks of sheep laying at the rest of it, because this was the well from which they watered the flocks. A good-sized rock lay on the mound of the well. What do we see here? Let's see everyone meeting at the well. When all the flocks were gathered there, they, the shepherds, would roll the stone off the well's mouth and water the flocks. Then they would put the stone back in place over the well's mouth. Jacob said to them, "My friends, where are you from?" "We are from Haran," they said. He said to them, "Do you know Laban, son of Nahor?" And they said, "We do know him." "Is he well?" said he to them. "He is well," said they. "And there is his daughter Rachel coming with the flock." He said, "Since the day is still young, and not yet the time for rounding up the livestock, why don't you water the flock and then take them out to the pasture?" But they said, "We can't do that until all the flocks are rounded up and they, that is the shepherds, roll the stone off the well's mouth. Then we water the sheep." While he was still talking with them, Rachel arrived with her father's sheep. She was a shepherd. When Jacob saw Rachel, daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, with his uncle Laban's flock, Jacob went over and rolled the stone off the well's mouth and watered his uncle Laban's flock. Let's go back and take a look here. We have Jacob's line here, and we can see the relationship that Rachel and Jacob are first cousins. So we get to say they know each other biblically in many senses. So this is why he's traveled to where he's traveled. Now verse 11. Now Jacob kissed Rachel and began to cry in a loud voice. Jacob then told Rachel that he was her father's kinsman, that he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. Upon hearing the news of his sister's son Jacob, Laban ran to greet him. Hugging and kissing him, he brought him into his house. Then Jacob told Laban everything that had happened. And Laban said to him, "Truly you are my bone and my flesh." So he stayed with him a whole month. So here's where he has a new master. And he's kind of taking on responsibilities. He's a kinsman. He's staying with them. Haven't decided what their wages are going to be yet. Laban then said to Jacob, "Just because you are my kin, should you serve me for nothing? Tell me what you want to be paid." Now Laban had 2 daughters. The elder was named Leah, and the younger was named Rachel. Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel's were beautiful of form and of top. He named the place Bethel, but originally it helps when you turn the page. Of face. Jacob was in love with Rachel. So he said, "I will work for you for 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel." So here we'll have the discussions. So Laban answered, "I would rather give her to you than to any other man. Stay here with me." So Jacob labored 7 years for Rachel, yet in his love for her they seemed to him but a few days. Jacob then said to Laban, "Let me have my wife. I have filled my term now. I want to make my love to her." So Laban invited all the people of all the place and made a feast. In the evening he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, who made love to her. And Laban gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah to be her maid. In the morning, look, it was Leah. And Jacob said to Laban, "What have you done to me? Wasn't it for Rachel that I agreed to serve you? Why did you deceive me?" And Laban replied, "This is not done in our region to give the younger before the firstborn. Fulfill this additional 7-year term, That one too will be given to you in exchange for additional 7 years of work that you will do for me. So, what does he do? He goes back out to the fields for the second wife. Jacob did so. He fulfilled his additional term of 7 years, whereupon Laban gave him his daughter Rachel as a wife. Laban then gave his maid Bilhah to his daughter Rachel to be her maid. Now, what I find very interesting is you never hear of a daughter being named after one of the handmaidens. You don't run into many that Hagars in the U.S., but you run into plenty of Rachels and Rebecca's and Leah's. Patrick says he always wondered how much of a trickster Laban actually is. Is he really a bad guy, or is he acting out of his cultural wants? That's a very interesting thing. I mean, he does come from a different region. It is the kinsman of his father, but it would be completely different culture. It would be, forgive me, I have to go sci-fi nerd for you, but I think you mean something like trying to deal with a Ferengi if you're a Bajoran, or trying to deal with a Fremen if on Arrakis. It's dealing with a totally different culture and a totally different land, and not being the one in the lead, not being the one with the advantage of the home court, being the one that is always, sort of the underdog. You're in outlying lands, you have to take care of yourself, you're looking after your family. There's this promise, there's God, but what are you seeing right there? And you're seeing two different sides of the same coin. So I'm really glad you brought that up, Patrick. That's one of those things that we're looking for, an underlying theme that's occurring. What's going on here? We're having another time where you see the cultural difference. You see the well. That's another one. We're looking at the wells again. Jacob's meeting of Rachel at the well here, Genesis chapter 29. This was the second of several meetings at watering holes that led to marriage. That if you look at the scene of the same type of Abraham's servant meeting on behalf of Isaac, of course, Rebecca at the well, and Moses' meeting of Zipporah at the well in Exodus, each involves 1, a trip to a distant land, 2, a stop at a well, 3, a young woman coming to the well to draw water, 4, a heroic drawing of the well. Jacob lifts the stones that normally all the shepherds lifts. 5, the young women are going home to report to their family. 6, the visiting man brought to the family, and in some cases being of the family. And 7, a subsequent marriage. And in this case, 2 marriages. So we get even more bang for the buck, so to speak. So where were we? So, verse 30. Jacob made love with Rachel too. He loved Rachel, for whom he had served Laban yet another 7 years, so much more than Leah. Now seeing that Leah was disfavored, the Eternal opened her womb, while Rachel was childless. Leah thus became pregnant and bore a son, and named him Reuben. For she said, The Eternal saw my plight. Yes, now my husband will love me. Again she became pregnant and bore a son, and said, The Eternal heard that I am despised, and has given me one too. So she named him Simeon. And she became pregnant, and again she became pregnant, and bore a son, and said, Now this time my husband will be attached to me, for I have borne to him 3 sons. She therefore named him Levi, or Levi. Again she became pregnant and bore a son, and said, "This time I give thanks to the Eternal." She therefore named him Judah. She then stopped the bearing. When Rachel saw that she was not bearing children to Jacob, Rachel came to envy her sister. She said to Jacob, "Let me have children, otherwise I am a dead woman." Jacob grew angry with Rachel and said, Am I in place of God, who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb?" But she said, "Here is my handmaiden Bilhah. Come with her, and let her give birth on my knees, so that I too may have a son through her." So she gave him her handmaiden Bilhah as a wife, and Jacob coupled with her. Now here, yet we have another theme coming up again: the handmaiden given over, just like Hagar was given over as a way to gain a legitimate line. Let's see. So she becomes pregnant and bore a son to Jacob. Rachel said, "God has judged me and has also listened to my plea and given me a son." She therefore named him Dan. Again, Rachel's maid Bilhah became pregnant. She bore a second son to Jacob. Jacob then said, "A mighty rivalry have I waged with my sister. Moreover, I have prevailed." She therefore named him Nephtalit. When Leah saw that she was no longer bearing children, she took her maid Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. And Zilpah, Leah's maid, bore a son to Jacob. Leah said, "Fortune has come." She therefore named him Gad. And Zilpah, Leah's maid, bore a second son to Jacob. Leah then said, "How happy I am! Yes, women will call me happy." She therefore named him Asher, which is a very interesting name if you look into the history of not only Ashers that are in the world, but Ashers you actually meet. It's very interesting personality, especially throughout history. I wish I had an example off the top of my head to give you. I've been studying a lot in philanthropy lately, and that has given born to that fruit of an idea. Verse 14. In the time of the wheat harvest, Reuben went out and found mandrakes in the field. When he brought them to his mother Leah, Rachel said to Leah, "Pray, give me some of your son's mandrakes." She replied, "Isn't it enough that you took my husband, and now you want to take my son's mandrakes?" And Rachel said, "Very well, let him sleep with you tonight in exchange for your son's mandrakes." When Jacob came in from the field that evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, "I am the one which you will bed tonight, for I brought you with my son's mandrakes." That night he slept with her. And God now listened to Leah. She became pregnant and bore a fifth son to Jacob. Now, side note here, if you didn't already know before, mandrakes are a plant whose potato-like bulbs sometimes look like faces, which is where you get the whole Harry Potter ideal of them. Is like the Asher we know. He's somewhat like the trash is like the Asher we know, Patrick. But you get the puppets that come out in Harry Potter that are the mandrakes with faces on them and making the having personality enough to make noises and grow into teenagers and have acne and the such. The ancient belief in the mandrake as a sexual stimulant has persisted into modern times. The potion fails for Rachel. Well, we'll get to that. But the point being is that it was thought to be of importance for bearing children. So Leah has born a fifth son, and Leah said, God has given me my reward for giving my maid to my husband. She therefore named him Ishar. Again, Leah became pregnant. She bore a sixth son to Jacob. Leah then said, God has given me a fine gift. Now my husband will finally give a wedding gift due me, for I have borne him 6 sons. She therefore named him Zebulun. Afterwards she bore a daughter and named her Diana. Now God remembered Rachel. God listened to her and opened her womb, so she became pregnant and bore a son. She said, God has removed my disgrace. She therefore named him Joseph, saying, May the Eternal add on another son for me. Josephs are really interesting characters too, through all sorts of social reasons too. Now after Rachel bore Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, Release me. Let me go to my own place, my own land. Let me have my wives and my children for whom I toiled under you, and let me go, for you know the service I have rendered you. So now here we have, again, Jacob's asking for his leave. It's again, as in the beginning of the Parshat, as we're coming to, the end of this part of the narrative, this story, we're going to see, and he left. What Torah translation am I using? I'm using the Torah, a modern commentary. It's the Union for Reforming Judaism's version. Pardon me. So here's a question for Patrick. Why haven't the Jewish people really taken on Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat? Yeah, isn't that interesting? Interesting enough, you're using the JPS, or Patrick's using the JPS. Patrick says he means it is our story. Something about I think it's really something about redemption of the story, of the Dreamcoat story. See my cowboy pajamas on, I'm working in my pajamas. The real thing that it's the idea of redemption of the some son coming back that is latched onto by Christian ideals that makes it so prevalent of a story amongst specifically Baptist cultures in my research. But it's just in general come across in groups who proselytize and whatnot. It's a very great story. River Jewel has the JPS and the Art Scroll edition translation. Well, we'll see if we can't use the Art Scroll or the JPS next time. My JPS is tiny. It's really hard to read, and my eyes are failing me at a too young an age. We'll see if we can't. It's probably closer to the JPS version. It's going to be very similar to it. It's based off the same translations. So verse 25, now that we've verse 26. Let's read 25 again. Now after Rachel bore Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, Release me, let me go to my own place and my own land. Let me have my wives and my children for whom I toiled under you, and let me go, for you know the service I have rendered you. Laban then said to him, Please, hear this. I have prospered, and the Eternal has blessed me on your account. He said, Indicate your wages to me, and I will pay them. Jacob said to him, You know the result of my labors for you and your livestock fared with me. What little you had before I came along has increased greatly. The Eternal has blessed you at my every step. But now, when shall I provide for myself, for my own household? Laban said, What should I pay you? Jacob replied, "Don't pay me a thing. If you do this for me, I shall return to sheep herding, to keeping your flock. Let me pass by all your flock today, removing from it every spotted and speckled kid, and every dark lamb among the rams, and every speckled and spotted goat. That will be my payment. My honesty shall answer for me on the morrow, when you give me my wages in your presence. I affirm that any animal that is not either spotted among the goats, or speckled or dark among the rams, is stolen, if found in my possession." "Agreed," said Laban. "Let it be as you have said." But that day he, being Laban, removed the streaked and speckled he-goats, and all the spotted and speckled she-goats, every one that had white on it, and every one of the young rams that was dark, and handed them over to his sons. He then set a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob tended what remained of Laban's flock. Jacob now took fresh rods of poplar, almond, and plane, and peeled off white strips of bark, stripping the white on the surface of the rods. He set the rods he had just peeled by the water troughs, by the trenches filled with water where the flock was to drink, opposite the sheep, and they went into the heat as they approached to drink. When the flocks conceived in front of the rods, they brought forth young that were striped, speckled, and spotted. And the young rams Jacob left for himself, turning the faces of the flocks towards all the sheep of Laban's that were streaked or dark. He set apart herds for himself, and did not join them to Laban's flocks. So we have this very interesting occurrence that's going on with rods again becoming important, as it has in other books, and will become in later books. So when the hardy among the flocks went into the heat, Jacob placed the rods in the direct view of the sheep at the water troughs, to bring them into the heat by virtue of the rods. But he did not put them among the sickly of the flocks, so that the sickly ones became Laban's, and the hardy Jacob's. Thus the man prospered more and more, and he had abundant flocks, female slaves and male slaves, camels and donkeys. Chapter 31. Jacob now heard the words of Laban's sons. They were saying, "Jacob has taken all that belongs to our father. It is from our father's possessions that he has gained all this wealth." And Jacob saw Laban's contents plainly. It was no longer favorable to him as before. So the Eternal One said to Jacob, "Return to the land of your ancestors, to your birthplace, and I will be with you." Jacob therefore summoned Rachel and Leah to the field to his flocks, and said to them, "When I look at your father's contents, it is no longer as favorable to me in the days gone by, but the God of my father has been with me." Pardon me. "Now you are aware that I have labored with you with all for your father, but your father has deceived me," the trickster again, right? "Your father has deceived me, changing my pay 10 times, though God has not let him harm me. So that if he said, 'The spotted shall be your pay,' the flocks bore spotted. And if he said, 'The streaked shall be your pay,' the flocks bore streaked. God has taken away your father's livestock and given them to me. One time, when the flocks were in heat, in a dream, I looked up and saw that the male goats mounting the flock were streaked, spotted, and dappled. In that dream, an angel of God said to me, 'Jacob, here I am.' And I," that is Jacob, "then the angel said, 'Pray, look up. See how the male goats mounting the flocks are striped, spotted, and molted, for I have seen all that Laban has done to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a monument, where you made me a vow. Now get up, leave this land, and return to your native land.'" So here we go, fulfillment of the vow. So, Patrick asks again, so is he the trickster? Laban is not a cultural thing. Yeah. Is he the trickster? It must be the trickster. This is his third deception. That usually, in any good fairy tale or any reference to any historical tale, 3 is usually your magic number. You get 3, 7, and 18, I think, is the other one. So, let's see. So, let's let that be our question of the week, to think about. Is he a trickster, or is he doing cultural things? Is he being the wise Ferengi and using the rules of acquisition to his benefit, or is he, being a cheapskate? He did separate flocks. We do have to think about that now, don't we? So, verse 14. Rachel and Leah made this response to him: Have we any longer a portion or inheritance in our father's house? Are we not like foreigners to him? He sold us and has completely eaten up our money. Since all the wealth that God has taken away from our father is ours and our children's, so now do just what God has commanded you. So, they put it quite plainly, don't they? Do what you're told. If you were told in a dream what was going to happen, and it happened, then do what you're told now. Jacob then got up and mounted his sons and his wives on camels. He drove all his livestock and all his possessions that he acquired. The livestock and his possession that he acquired in Padan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. While Laban had gone to shear his sheep, Rachel had stolen her father's household gods, and Jacob had deceived Laban the Aramean by not informing him that he was fleeing. This is in parentheses in my translation. And you'll find lots more argumentation about this than we have time for. We're already over time. But if you ever want to research a really interesting little two-part line somewhere, research that verse 19 through 20 of chapter 31 in Genesis. 21. Jacob fled with all that was his, going up and crossing the river and setting his face toward the hill country of Gilead. Not until the third day was Laban told that Jacob had fled. He then took his kin with him and pursued Jacob, a 7-day trek, and caught up with him in the hill country of Gilead. God then came to Laban the Aramean in a dream of the night, saying to him, Beware, lest you speak to Jacob, beginning well, but ending ill. Aha! When Laban caught up to Jacob, Jacob had pitched his tents by the mountain. Laban then drove his tent pegs among his kinsmen near Mount Gilead. Laban said to Jacob, What have you done, deceiving me and driving my daughters off like prisoners of war? Why did you flee my strength and deceive me by not informing me? I would have sent you off with festive songs, with hand drums and lyre. Nor did you give me a chance to kiss my sons and daughters. How foolishly you acted. Is this the trickster or the culture, right? It is well within my power to do you an injury. But the God of your fathers said to me last night, Beware lest you speak to Jacob, beginning well but ending ill. Now listen, you have gone away because you yearned so desperately for your father's house. But why did you steal my goats? Jacob responded by saying to Laban, Because I was afraid, because I said to myself, Suppose you steal your daughters from me, but the one whom you find your gods shall not live. See for yourself in front of your kin what I have with me, and get back. Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. Laban then entered Jacob's tent and Leah's tent, and the tent of the two maids, and found nothing. He then left Leah's tent and entered Rachel's tent. Rachel had taken the household gods and put them in camel saddlebags, and was sitting on them as Laban rummaged through everything in the tent and found nothing. She now said to her father, May my lord not take offense that I cannot give up your presence, for the way of women is upon me. He searched, but did not find the household gods. Jacob then grew angry, and berated Laban. Jacob spoke up by saying to Laban, What is my transgression? What is my sin that you pursued me so hotly, that you felt all my goods? What did you find all of your household goods? Put it before my kin and yours, and let them decide betwixt them. These 20 years that I have been with you and your ewes and your she-goats never miscarried, and I never ate the rams of your flocks. I never brought you an animal torn up by wild beasts. I made good the loss from my own possessions, when you demanded it for a sheep stolen by day or by night. For me it was by day the heat consumed me, and the cold by night, and sheep fled from my eyes. Thus it was for me. 20 years I served you in your house, 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flocks. And you changed my pay 10 times. Had not the God of my father, the God of Abraham, the fear of Isaac been for me, you would right now be driving me away empty-handed. But God saw my affliction and heard labor, and warned you last night. Laban then responded by saying to Jacob, the daughters are my daughters, and the sons are my sons, and the flocks are my flocks. Everything that you see is really mine. But as for my daughters, what can I now do with them, or the sons that they have borne? So now come, let us make a pact, you and I, and let it be a witness to us. Jacob then took a stone and raised it up as a monument. And Jacob said to his kin, gather stones so that these stones made a mound. So then they agreed by that mound that Laban called it, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, while Jacob called it Gilead. Laban said, this mound is between us today. Therefore Jacob named it Gilead, and this is Mitzpah, and Laban said, may the Eternal keep watch between you and me when we are hidden one from the other. Should you mistreat my daughters, or take my wives in addition to my daughters, though no one else is with us, consider, God is witness between you and me. And Laban said additionally to Jacob, behold this mountain, and behold this monument that I have raised in between us. This mound is a witness that the monument is a witness that I shall never pass this mound toward you, intending harm, and that you shall never pass this mound and this monument toward me, intending harm. Let both the gods of Abraham and the gods of Nahor be the gods of each one's father. Judge between us. And Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac, and Jacob offered a sacrifice by the mountain, inviting his kin to eat bread. They ate bread and stayed the night by the mountain. In the morning Laban got up early, kissed his sons and daughters, and blessed them. He then went home. So Laban returned to his place. Now Jacob went on his way, and angels of God met him. And when he saw them, Jacob said, this is the camp of God. So he named that place Manaheim. Which has an interesting history. So thank you so much for coming. If you enjoyed this, remember that PunkTorah and OneShul both run on funding completely from you. If you have the chance, if you enjoyed it tonight, please take a moment and think of a way you're able to help us out so we can keep helping you. Can you donate some time to do a service? Can you support by going to OneShul and looking at one of their types of support? Can you donate some money? Can you do some work on one of our projects? There's so many ways to help out. Patrick asks or he asked me to remind you that we asked that $5 a class is asked if you can do it. If you go down the street to Starbucks in the morning, it's going to cost you $5 for a cup of coffee, whereas you and whoever lives in your house with you, if you just all had coffee tomorrow morning, it would be $2.50 to $5 for that whole pot for everyone. So, if you could throw a little bit money back, you're saving a little for yourself. I know how the economy is. Throw a little bit back. Even the poorest man has to learn the importance of giving. So give what you can, and please give generously. Thank you so much for coming, and I hope to see you again, please, next Monday. Take care.